Hey, everybody. Welcome to Song for This Day. I'm Ed Walsh, and if you're wondering exactly what Song for This Day is, well, I probably am too. But the theory is that I try to put together a theme and then draw some songs, some artists together, and talk about them so you get to think a little bit more about your favorite songs and maybe some of the interesting things about those songs. And today's theme happens to be girls' names. Now, Shakespeare said, "What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name could smell just as sweet." Romeo and Juliet. I'm not sure what that means, but I think it means that whatever we use a name for, the property still remains the same. And names sometimes for people can be inspired by celebrities. A popular name today, for instance, is Elijah, perhaps inspired by Elijah Wood, who played in Lord of the Rings and many other movies. Scarlett is a popular name today, and that might have been inspired by Scarlett Johansson, who is an Iron Man and so many, many other films. Or names can be taken from a historical meaning. For instance, Matthew means gift of God. And sometimes gender gets confused with names too. Charlie, for instance, was a typically masculine name, but lately there are as many Charlie baby girls as there are Charlie baby boys. So today we're going to take a look at some rock and roll girls' names. But before we start, just to have some context here, these are the 10 most popular girls' names today in order from number 1 through number 10. And they are Olivia, Amelia, Sophia, Emma, Isabella, Charlotte, Ilana, Ellie, Aurora, and Mia. So we're also familiar with a lot of the maybe more common names that exist in rock and roll music, like Michelle or Donna or Brandy, Beth, Jessie, Angie, Maggie May, Rosanna, Suzanne, Roxanne. We're not going to be using any of those aforementioned names, real or musical. We're going to get into some of the stranger names that our favorite rock and rollers and some of our favorite music draws us into attention for. And there's some pretty strange names in rock and roll, and I've never quite decided if it's a lack of creativity on the songwriter's part, maybe too many drugs, possibly momentary insanity, or maybe it's just some secret that I don't understand. Anyway, we're going to get started, and our first girl's name is probably the most unusual of the entire group that I've selected here. Now, it goes back to a song in the 50s that actually became more popular in the 60s. And if you'll remember the way the song begins, it goes, "I've got a girl named a Rama-Lama Lama Lama Ding Dong." Now, I never knew anybody named Rama-Lama Lama Ding Dong. I don't know if you did. And it always mystified me and amused me. And yet that is the constant name through this song by the Edsels, which was recorded in 1958, but didn't become popular until 1961, when a New York City DJ decided to start playing it as a segue to the Marcel song Blue Moon, which of course ended like bum ba ba bum ba bum ba bum bum Blue Moon. And you can see how that segue would have slided right in there. I got a girl named of Rama Lama 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 Ding Dong. Anyway, I always wondered too if that actually was her name, what her friends called her. Did they call her Rama or Rama Lama or what? And in school, when the teacher was going to ask her to say, "Miss Ding Dong, what are you doing over there?" That might have been offensive otherwise. And suppose you were dating her, as the rock singer says, "I got a girl named Rama Lama Ding Dong." If you called her up and her mother answered the phone, would you have to say, "Miss Ding Dong, is Rama Lama Lama home?" Anyway. I think we should probably move on, but before we do, the Edsels, just like the car that they took their name from, they didn't do so well. They had a short life, just like the Edsel did, and they only had the one hit. But it did occur to me at one point, if in fact there was a Ramalama, Lama Ding Dong, and she was a girl, I have to believe that she would walk down the street singing do wah diddy, diddy dum, diddy do. All right, we better move on. One more piece though. Barry Mann, a noted and gifted songwriter, he had a song that he wrote and recorded in like 10 minutes, and it was called Who Put the Bomb? And in that song, he references a number of questions, like who put the bomb in the bomb, shabomb, shabomb. He also says, who put the ram in the Ramalama Ding Dong? Barry Mann, along with his wife, Cynthia Wilde, they wrote a bunch of really great songs. Way better than Who Put the Bomb, way better than Ramalama Ding Dong. In fact, one of the songs that they wrote was the most played song in the last century. You know what that is? I'm going to tell you, but not till we get to the end here. Okay, so the first strange name was really very strange. The next one, it's still strange, but not quite as weird as number one. And that's Sloopy. Hang on, Sloopy. Not only was it a bad name, Sloopy, did you know anybody named Sloopy? I never did. I never knew that name until I heard it on the record. Hang on, Sloopy. And of course, Sloopy came from a very poor side of town, and everybody wanted to put her down. And hey, her self-esteem must have been really low. How do you get by when your name is Sloopy, right? I don't know. So the song was written by Bert Burns and Wes Farrell. And Bert Burns is one of those, I guess we'll call him an unheralded celebrity, because he had wrote and produced so many songs back in the 60s in a very short period of time, because Bert Burns, he had a congenital heart problem, which he knew was going to capture him early. So he wanted to get everything done he could in that short span of time. And he wrote songs like Twist and Shout, Piece of My Heart, Cry to Me, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, Tell 'Em by the Exciters, A Little Bit of Soap by the Jarmels, Here Comes the Night by Van Morrison. All right, now, maybe get a pencil and paper here, because this gets a tad bit confusing. I'm going to go slow, because it'll confuse me otherwise. The Strangeloves, they were three record producers. Their names are Bob Feldman, Jerry Goldstein, and Richard Gotterer. And they wrote a number of songs, including things like My Boyfriend's Back and Come On Down to My Boat. They also wrote a song called I Want Candy. And it was starting to become a hit. They recorded it themselves, and they thought, wow, we better go out on the road and we better support this song and make it an even bigger hit. So they hired a group of teenagers known as Rick and the Raiders, and they went on the road to promote I Want Candy. While they were on the road, they came across this song called My Girl Sloopy, and they liked it. And they started to do that at shows, and it was getting a lot of good audience appeal. So they thought, we should record this. But I Want Candy was going up the charts, and they thought if the Strangeloves recorded My Girl Sloopy, that it might deter the sales to the already semi-successful song. Now, also included in the tour that the Strangeloves are on, with their backup band, Rick and the Raiders, you following with me so far? Was a group called the Dave Clark Five. And Dave Clark heard this song, My Gal Sloopy, and he saw how the audience reacted to it, and he said, I'm going to record this song with my band when we get back to the UK. Well, the Strangeloves didn't want that to happen. They knew they couldn't record it themselves because it would hurt their sales. So they immediately took Rick and the Raiders, threw them into the recording studio, and they recorded My Gal Sloopy. Lead singer for the group, Rick Zeringer, he said, you know what? That doesn't work. How about Hang On, Sloopy? And they were like, that's good. And they recorded it. And Rick and the Raiders had a #1 hit that raced up the charts and lasted forever. Now, interestingly, of course, Rick and the Raiders became the McCoys. And they had a couple of hits after that, after Hang On, Sloopy. But they also went on, Rick and the Raiders, to become the core band for Johnny Winter. That's a strange juxtaposition. And then Rick Derringer, as he changed his name from Zeringer, He went on to work with Edgar Winter's White Trash and with Edgar Winter's regular band. And he also, Rick Derringer, became a noted session guitarist who was very much in demand. And he played on albums for people like George Harrison, Steely Dan, Alice Cooper, Bette Midler, and Barbra Streisand. That's a mix, isn't it? He was a great guitarist. So here's the other thing I'll leave you with Hang On Sloopy. Please find the video, the McCoy's video for Hang On Sloopy. And when you do, I promise that the furthest thing from your mind is that everybody wanted to put that girl down once you take a look at the actress who's playing Sloopy in the video. No one is going to put her down. Check it out. Okay, here we go. We started off, remember Ramalama Ding Dong? All right, this, I think, could probably be Ramalama's cousin. And her name is Tra-la-la-la Susie. Now, you may not remember this song. If you're my age, you would. It was a top 40 hit, and it was put together by Dean and Jean. Dean and Jean were actually Wes Young and Brenda Lee Jones. They were Dean and Jean. They wrote the song, they recorded the song. It was a top 40 hit. And it's a great rhyming song. It's a great catchy tune as well, too. And it tells a story. It tells a story that has a moral to it. And the moral is, don't be shy if you want to ask somebody out. Let me give you a sample of the lyrics. It starts off by saying, oh, you love little Sue, but you can't let Sue know. You're afraid little Susie might turn her back on you. After school, you'll miss her. How you long to kiss her, 'cause she's the loveliest, prettiest, sweetest little girl you know. So you think, wow, what's going to happen here? Well, it turns out that it works pretty well for the singer because the final chorus suggests, so you ask little Susie for a date on Tuesday. And she says, yes, what made you wait so long? And now her books you'll carry and pretty soon you'll marry. And oh yeah, you'll go through life and keep on singing Tra-la-la-la Susie. Okay, now, for some reason, that kind of took me to Paradise by the Dashboard Lights, the big long song, and you get to the end where the guy is pleading with her, please. And then finally he says, I promise I will love you for the rest of my life. And then in the fade on the song, he says, and now I'm praying for the end of time. Won't you hurry up and get on here? Okay, I hope the Tra-la-la Susie's husband didn't say that. All right, it's also an earworm, that Tra-la-la Susie. Once you hear it, it gets in your head and it never goes away. So here we're going to do something. If you've checked any of the previous videos, we've been here before. This is a song called Cinnamon, and it was recorded by a gentleman by the name of John Henry Blair. He was from Scotland, but raised here in the United States. And you're saying, wait, I don't know John Henry Blair. I've never heard that name before. Well, like most artists, he recorded his first song, which was Mr. Bassman, which I'm sure you might remember, and he used the name Johnny Cymbal. And after that song, he got involved in songwriting and production and produced songs for a lot of artists and wrote songs for people like Elvis Presley, David Cassidy, Gene Pitney, Glenn Campbell. He was a very active songwriter and a very active producer of music as well. But then he got the itch to get back in the game, and he wrote this song called Cinnamon, and he decided he would record it himself. But he didn't record it as John Henry Blair, and he didn't record it as Johnny Cymbal. He recorded it as Derek, and the song went on to become a big hit. And his songwriting actually was a little bit lame because if you know the song, he's like 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4. Open up cinnamon, I want more. He, of course, just to clarify, was referring to the door. All right, so the next song. I did a piece a while back on songs that were censored and songs that shouldn't be on the radio. And this is one of those songs that should, in my mind, never be on the radio. It was written by Huddie Ledbetter back in 1940s. Huddie Ledbetter is probably better known as Leadbelly. And he wrote the song, and even though he, as an African-American, wrote it, the song was actually written up by the NAACP and by CORE, because they felt it was a little bit antithetical as far as the image of African American women that they wanted to portray. So it was a traditional song. It was an acoustic song, and Leadbelly also wrote a very lovely song like "Goodnight Irene," and he also wrote the Midnight Special. The song came in contact with a group called Starstruck, and they recorded it, and it just kind of laid around for a while. The leader of that band, Starstruck, was a gentleman by the name of Bill Bartlett. And Bill, actually, in a previous life, was the lead singer for a group called the Lemon Pipers. I'm sorry I forgot my tambourine today. But the Lemon Pipers, of course, had that wonderful ballad about the green tambourine. And also in the group, too, was a gentleman by the name of Howie Blauvelt. Not an artistic name, but Howie, he played in a band called the Hassles back in the day, way before, actually, Starstruck and Ram Jam. And that band, the Hassles, actually included a gentleman on keyboards by the name of Billy Joel, before he was Billy Joel. So the interesting thing about the song, Black Betty, and the fact that it was credited to Ram Jam is that the recording was actually done by the previous band, Bill Bartlett's previous band, which of course was Starstruck. And it did get a lot of negative attention because the lyrics are really very questionable as far as African American women are concerned. Oh, Black Betty, wham-a-lam. Oh, Black Betty, wham-a-lam. Black Betty had a child, bam-a-lam. The damn child went wild. That's not positive. And so in order to kind of function away from the backlash that the record company was getting, they released a statement. And the statement said that Black Betty was a nickname for a whiskey. No, it wasn't a nickname for a whiskey. If you listen to the lyrics, that didn't happen because that whiskey had nothing to do with the lyrics in Black Betty. All right, we're moving on to My Sharona. She's not my Sharona. She's actually Doug Fieger's Sharona. Doug wrote the song, he said, after he met 17-year-old Sharona, and he said he fell immediately in love with her. Now, you may think that's not a good thing for a gentleman who's 22 years old to be in love with a 17-year-old. But hey, the Beatles laid the groundwork for him. She was just 17. You know what I mean? Anyway, Doug fell in love with Sharona, and he wrote this song for her. And his band, The Knack, and their album, which was called Get the Knack, immediately raced up the charts. It became a huge hit, My Sharona, #1 in several countries. But the band just didn't revolve well. They refused to do interviews, and so the critics hated them. They were overexposed because My Sharona was such a big hit. And you remember what that did to Peter Frampton. And to paraphrase Yogi Berra, The Knack had become so popular nobody wanted to listen to them. So their next ventures really didn't turn out that well, and they were not able to actually follow up My Sharona. Now, Sharona is not that uncommon a name in names I'm doing here, but I have to say the reason I did My Sharona here was because it has such questionable lyrics in it. It is one of the most suggestive songs that probably ever made its way onto the radio. My Sharona. And I also wanted to be able to say, to quote the song, not for me, but to quote the song, that every time I hear the song and Doug Fieger sings, always get it up for the younger kind, I get this wicked smile on my face, just like the one that's there now. Okay, now we have a song called Sue's Studio, a girl's name that I've never heard. Are you familiar with anyone named Sue Studio? And I heard it, and the first time I heard it, I thought, wait, is that like a British name? Because it was sung by Phil Collins. And yet it was a great tune, poppy tune, happy tune, a big hit. And I thought, well, where does that come from? So I did a little research, and it turns out that Sue Studio is, even though it's reflected that way in the song's lyrics, is simply a sound, nonsense, that Phil Collins came up with. And to quote Phil Collins, he said, and I quote, "So I set up this drum machine pad and I got some chords, and I started to sing into the microphone. And this word came out, studio. It just came out. So I went back, and I tried to find another word that I could substitute for it, and I couldn't. So I said, what the heck? We're going to stick with studio. And so there you have the name of a song, the name of a girl, but it's just a nonsense phrase that was filler that he needed when he had to record that. Now, of course, Phil Collins, he came from Genesis. You remember Genesis back in the day. Back in the day when they were fronted by Peter Gabriel, and they did all those art songs. And then Peter Gabriel announced that he was going to be leaving the band. And I don't know about you, but when I heard that, not a terribly big Genesis fan myself, but when I heard that, I thought, that's it for them. They're done. Peter Gabriel, their lead singer and one of their primary songwriters, is on his way into a solo career, and Genesis just isn't going to exist anymore. But then we discovered, with their first album post Peter Gabriel, that Phil Collins could sing, and he sounded a lot like Peter Gabriel. And then we discovered that he could write songs, and that the rest of the band members could write these great poppy tunes. And then they wound up with 10 top 20 singles, 6 of which were top 10s, and 1 of which was a number 1. And so they left Peter Gabriel and the art songs in the dust and moved on. And then, of course, Phil Collins left Genesis, and he had his own huge career after that. And Mike Rutherford of Genesis also formed his own band called Mike and the Mechanics, and he, too, had his own successful career. So, think back for a second. Do you remember way back in the beginning, and we're talking about Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil? Well, I said to you that they had written the most played song in the last century. What was that song? Anyone? Anyone? That song was You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling. And yeah, Phil Spector took some writing credits for it too, because he produced it with a wall of sound, and it was a huge hit, and it has remained a huge hit. Constantly played, constantly covered. I forget how many covers there were. But and then, of course, Daryl Hall and John Oates took the song, and they re-recorded it, and it became a big hit for them as well. So, strange songs with strange girls' names. Ramalama Ding Dong, Tralalala Susie, Studio, Sharona, Black Betty. Where do they come from? Like I said at the beginning, I don't know if it's a creative lapse, too much drugs, temporary insanity, or just something I don't understand. All fine songs, all very unusual girls' names. So, that's it for Song for This Day today. I'm Ed Walsh. Thanks for riding along. If you enjoyed this adventure today, I encourage you to go back to the LTV YouTube channel and check out, under playlists, some of the previous ones that we did too. I think you'll enjoy them just as well if you enjoyed today. So thanks for riding along. Hope you enjoyed this. In the meantime, happy trails until we meet again.